Welcome to my introduction into Nest. It's a framework to build server-side applications with Node. In this course you will learn the basic concepts that are the building blocks of this framework. If you want to learn more you should take a look at some of my other videos that digging deeper into this topic. So let's start with a basic definition. What is Nest? Nest is a framework for building efficient, scalable Node server-side applications. It uses progressive JavaScript, is built with and fully supports TypeScript and combines elements of object-oriented programming. Plenty of libraries, helpers, and tools exist for Node and server-side JavaScript, none of them effectively solve the main problem. I'm talking about architecture. Nest provides an out-of-the-box application architecture which allows developers and teams to create highly testable, scalable, loosely coupled, and easily maintainable applications. As the concepts that uses by Nest are no new inventions, let's take a look at some similar frameworks and approaches you may already know. This list is based on my personal experiences and observations of the high-level concepts. Maybe you disagree with some of them, but let me guide you through the thoughts and comments of this list. A very common framework for enterprise developers is Spring Boot. It is a subproject of the popular Spring framework that is around for over 15 years now. If you're more familiar with the Microsoft world, you definitely came across the .NET Core framework. Ruby on Rails on the other hand is not so common in big enterprise projects but more in smaller projects and agencies. It's quite popular and also around for over 10 years. The last one on this small list is Angular. As Angular is a front-end framework you may be confused, but Nest is heavily influenced by this framework and this concepts. So let's take a look at the common concepts of all these different frameworks. One of the biggest common concept you can see in all of them is the focus on business logic. All of them offering a lot of hidden complexity and structure so we as users of the framework are able to fully focus on our own business logic instead of writing too much technical optimizations. In the best case you just write simple classes that represents your business logic and are connected to the base framework via annotations, decorator or similar concepts. To ensure you can easily benefit as much as possible from the framework they often come with a generator. This generators on the one hand comes with an opinionated package and code structure, but also on the other hand the possibility to upgrade your projects very seamless because most projects in the industry follow the same structure. That also leads to the benefit that new team members can focus more learning about your business use cases instead of learning your code architecture and structure. With the separation of concerns your code results in small and well-structured slices that are easy to understand and maintain. Because no one is good in maintaining files and concepts that mix too many things and contain overlapping responsibilities. That all leads to very atomic and testable blocks in your application what again results in a very maintainable and long-living software. So if you already used one of these frameworks, many concepts may be familiar when you take a look at Nest. That all leads to very atomic and testable blocks in your application what again results in a very maintainable and long-living software. So if you already used one of these frameworks, many concepts may be familiar when you take a look at Nest. What are the benefits of using Nest? So for me it really depends, as always, on your project and situation, but let's take a look at some aspects that might help to make a decision. When you're writing a single-page application it's very likely that you already using TypeScript, so you or your whole team don't have to switch between different languages for the front and back end. This results in the next benefit, you can reuse interfaces and DTO on both sides, and I know there are projects like Swagger and Co that can generate your interface, but in this case we actually using the same file and definitions. If you using for example Angular for your front end you also simplify your project by using the same structure and tooling for it. That's also true for the concepts that are very similar and developers don't have to waste time by costs of switching contexts and paradigms. So let's take a closer look on the concepts and benefits that Nest is offering us. The first three concepts we will talk about are controllers, services and modules. These are the basic parts of every application you will build with Nest. So let's start the whole journey with a situation like this. We have a basic JavaScript client that runs in a browser. This client wants to show a list of events and sends the corresponding request to our Nest backend. The endpoint here is called event. As response the client expects an array of event objects. So a typical CRUD operation. If our request is received by our server, Nest routes this request to a specific controller. Each controller is responsible for a specific resource we provide. In our example we're requesting a list of event to the event's endpoint, so the event controller will take care of this request. Inside our event controller there are implementation of different methods to receive one or many events. Also, there's some methods that are responsible to execute, create, update or delete operations of an event resource. As a controller is only the mapping of this functions to an endpoint, the implementation of this functions should not be part as our event controller itself. So we're using a so-called service for any business logic that is part of our application. This event service implements our business logic and how we access the data. In our example, we loading the data from a local database, so we need to implement methods for this access inside of this service. Typically this is managed via an object that is called repo. This object is provided by Nest itself, so we just have to configure it with the correct database parameters. An endpoint and a corresponding service could be wrapped up in a module. A module can structure similar parts of your application and allows to use common configurations or enable reusability. So this is a very high-level overview of the basic terms and concepts and their relation to each other. Implementation. Let's take a look how a server written in Nest actually looks like. I'm using very simplified code examples at this point to just show you the basic idea. We will go through them in the order as our request calls the different parts of our application. At first, the request is handled by our event controller. The controller is generally just a class with some annotations that connects this class to the Nest framework. The controller decorated allows us to define the API endpoint we want to handle with this class. In our case, it's events. With the get decorator, we're able to define which method is responsible for the different actions on this resource. In this example, I've just added the list and request for a single event resource. In this functions, we're using our event service. This service is injected via dependency injection, so we only have to request an instant of it. This is done in the constructor with the type parameter. So let's take a look what's going on in our event service. The event service implements the database access. As you can see, this is also done by only a few lines of code. That's because we're also using dependency injection in our constructor to request a Nest-specific service which is a helper for the connection. Via the inject repository decorator, we can specify a class which should be connected to the database. This class is a generic repository that offers methods like find and other very convenient methods. You can't use just every class as generic for a repository. So let's take a look at the event class. You can't use just every class as generic for a repository. So let's take a look at the event class. The package we're using here is called typeOrm. This package offers some handy decorators as well, like entity, column and primary generated column, so we're able to define all our column configurations in a simple and readable format directly at our class. But how the repository know to which database it should connect? So we're able to define all our column configurations in a simple and readable format directly at our class. But how the repository know to which database it should connect? This is done by a separate file called ormconfig.json. As you can see, the configuration is very straightforward. One interesting thing is the wildcard definition for entities that finds automatically all entities that should be mapped in our project. So that's basically all you need to do to create a very basic CRUD service in Nest. Sure, there are more things to know in detail, but we will take a closer look at the different concepts in other more specialized sessions. We nearly forgot to take a look at our module. So our module is basically represented by a simple class that is extended via an decorator. Here we glue our different parts of this feature together. As you can see, also very straightforward and easy to understand. You can do more advanced things with modules for sure, but we don't need more than this simple configuration at this point. Summary. So let's sum up what we've learned. It was a really high-level overview, but I think you got some basic orientation in the world of Nest. I hope with this basic overview you're able to get your head around the basics of Nest. Let's recap what we've learned so far. We've talked about the basic concepts and the relation to other frameworks. Also, we looked how a request is handled by the Nest architecture to get a basic understanding of controllers, services and modules. At the end, we've seen some example implementations how this concepts actually look like in Nest. So what's next? How to learn even more of Nest. So there are plenty of topics you should dig deeper into, depending on what you need for your specific project. I'll try to cover as much as possible with my courses to help you on this journey. I'm really curious about your feedback about this video. Please leave a comment on this video so I can improve the lessons. Thank you.